Hi, kia ora, and welcome to the Creative Matters podcast, where we have really inspiring conversations with artists living in and from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Yakic. Hi, and thank you again for being here and for returning to listen to the podcast. This episode is very generously sponsored by Turua Gallery. Turua Gallery is nestled in the heart of St Heliers Bay in Auckland, and it offers a really beautiful, relaxed space that welcomes you to freely appreciate the creative works of fellow New Zealanders. Their mission is to connect people with the creative works of both established and emerging New Zealand artists. Through a curated program of solo and group exhibitions, they offer art lovers the opportunity to discover and collect special pieces that speak to them. Recently, Turua Gallery added twilight viewings to their ways to view artworks. Available in the evenings, Monday to Friday, 5:30 till 8, this is a brand new way to experience art in an intimate and exclusive setting. Whether you're looking for a special night out with your partner or friends, searching for the perfect, significant birthday or wedding gift, or simply indulging in your passion for art, Turua Gallery's twilight viewings offer an unforgettable experience, and they are private evening sessions which allow guests to explore Turua's latest exhibitions, curated collections, and stockroom treasures in a relaxed and elegant atmosphere. Ngā mihi nui, thank you again to Liz and Dean and the beautiful Turua Gallery for supporting this episode. Now on to episode 164 with contemporary artist Michelle McIver. Michelle McIver is a contemporary artist who grew up in rural Otago and is now living in Tāmaki Makaurau Auckland. Her work explores the interplay of light, colour and form through abstract compositions. Using simple geometric shapes, she layers and juxtaposes blocks and bands of colour to create depth and structure. Each painting is an exploration of how light interacts with form, evoking a sense of balance in its abstract simplicity. Michelle and I feel like kindred spirits. I loved sitting down with her and having a good chat in my little studio. We explore how she went from figurative drawing from a young age to abstract painting later in life, her short-lived experience studying art at university after leaving school, her experience living in Japan for 7 years, and how this time has influenced her and her work. We discuss how she came to seascape and landscape painting, her connection to the sea and to the land. Michelle shares her personal story of how the Christchurch earthquake disaster deeply affected her and her family, forcing a move out of the city 4 days later and a new direction. We explore a pivotal time in Michelle's practice when she studied painting at Brown School of Art in 2024, the ways her art practice evolved over this time, and how the guidance from the teachers has helped her to gain confidence in her work, helping her to settle on her own ideas, talk about her work, and push her thinking and techniques to finally develop her own personal style. Michelle talks us through her early and current artistic practice and process, her painting techniques using glazes and acrylic paint, how she approaches scale, titling work, and her connection with her two art galleries, Turua Gallery and Gallery de Novo. And we talk about so much more. I know you're going to really enjoy this episode. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Mandy.
Oh my God, it's so good to have you here.
It's been a wee while coming.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah.
So we met quite a few years ago, probably 4 years ago, maybe three or four.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Through Turua Gallery, I think. And we were sort of pretty much instant friends and just had a real connection artistically and as people, I think.
I think I first met you after talking with Tanya Blong at Art in the Park, first year that it was held. And she said, I think you should talk with Mandy. She's got this new podcast at the time. I think you should do that with her. And I was terrified at the thought of doing that and thought, yeah, that's not going to happen. And so, Mandy, here we are 3 years later.
Yeah, which is
About?
good. That shows progress.
Yeah, we've got here.
We've got here, and I have been harassing you a little bit over the last few years.
You have.
Yeah.
I've been happily harassed.
Yes, but it's so good that you are at the point now where you really feel like you've got something to talk about with your art practice.
Yeah.
And that shows, a lot of growth and sort of, I can see that your practice has evolved so much. So it feels like a really good time to start talking about it.
Yeah, I thought so too. And I think initially I just thought, I've got no story. I don't know what to tell you, other than telling you what's gone on in the past and sort of how I got to here. I thought when it actually comes down to talking about my art and what I'm painting, no clues about how I could talk about that at any length.
And I think that's so common, isn't it? So many artists feel like that. And it is hard. I mean, it's one thing to write a bio, which is hard enough. But to actually sit down, and especially when you imagine that you're going to talk for longer than an hour about yourself and your art practice, it's quite daunting. But, it is actually amazing once you kind of start talking about it. And in some ways, having the podcast recording, the podcast chat as a thing in your head, it probably also helps you to clarify your thinking.
It totally has. So the thought of having this podcast coming up, and also, which we'll get into later on, but last year doing Brown School of Art were the first times where I felt as though, oh my God, I need to get ducks into a row, and I actually need to sit down and really have a think about it. So it's been a long time coming, and all I can think of is, why didn't I do that sooner?
But it wasn't the right time, probably.
No, maybe not.
Yeah.
No, and I do believe in that too.
It's great now to be able to sort of look back and reflect and sort of take stock of where you've got to in a way.
Older and wiser, Mandy.
Yeah, that's good. Yay for getting old.
Yeah, I'm all for being older and wiser.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so Michelle, I feel like I'm really quite familiar with your art practice, and I absolutely love it. And weirdly, I'm seeing connections with the way that I work with the way that you work.
Yeah.
In fact, because I have been making a bit more recently, it's kind of come into my mind that, I can actually see similarities knowing that you were coming. And then we were talking earlier about how we do have a similar approach to painting and that sort of idea of fragmentation and fracturing and it's really interesting. And then we looked at one of my older works, like really quite a lot older. I suppose I made that, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago.
Wow.
And there are similarities as well.
Huge similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah. But we've talked about that and how I think, you and I, from that first meeting, I felt like, or I think we both felt like there were huge similarities, and it's a weird thing. I felt like I knew you right from the get-go, really. So, it's been so therefore it doesn't surprise me that we're both perhaps attracted to the same things and sort of having the same thought processes and maybe going down similar paths. Yeah.
And a connection to the sea and to the landscape.
Yep.
Yeah. It's I think we are kindred spirits. And,
I think so.
Maybe we were sisters in a past
We are
life.
twinnies, almost.
Yeah. Anyway, enough about us. We could go on and celebrate our beautiful friendship.
Oh, we could.
So let's just go back to the beginning, Michelle. Tell us about what sort of kid you were and if you were showing creative signs.
So I grew up in Otago, and all of my family are Otago based, pretty much always have been. Rural upbringings. Dad was working on farms, and so we were kind of around a little bit of Canterbury, and then Otago, and then South Otago, and then probably my high school years we moved into Balclutha, which is a town of about 5,000. And it was like, I don't remember mum or dad. No, there was nobody who was very artistic in the family or at all. But I was just always obsessed with drawing. And, it was before I started school, and because we lived rurally, there wasn't a lot of shops nearby, and I just remembered scrounging for paper, ripping off the calendars when the month was done, scribbling all over that, and, sounding a bit like a Depression era child here, but every bit of paper got covered. I loved drawing people, and I do know that mum and dad pretty much kept everything. So mum died just a couple of years ago, and I went through all her bits and bobs and thought, oh my God, there they still are. Those.
Isn't that beautiful? And
Yeah,
I'm sorry
yeah.
that you lost your mum.
Yeah.
I lost my mum
thank you.
too 2 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah. See, it's another
see
similarity.
another thing.
There you go.
It was pretty much all I ever did. So I remember as a kid thinking I so couldn't wait for a rainy day to come around, because I would get new crayons, new pencils, and just be told always, no, you've got to get outside, you've got to go outside and play. These need to be kept for a rainy day. And so in my mind, rainy days became associated with, okay, this is where the fun happens. This is as good as it gets. And kind of, through, by the time I finished primary, my headmaster at the school said to mum and dad at parent-teacher meetings that he would like to see me go on to art school,
Really?
which was kind of quite early on. I was 11, 12 at the time. So it was always just an assumption. And from mum and dad as well, it was an assumption that that's what I did. I drew.
Wow. And how good that he planted that seed for your parents and for you.
Yeah. And I, I think in hindsight they probably did take notice at what he had said. I think Dad sort of, in a way, fancied himself as a bit of a drawer himself, and had a pretty exacting eye, and used to actually shred me to bits, looking at my pictures and telling me, when my perspective was off and all the things that weren't right about it, which I hated. And but so therefore I think he was very in support of going on to do art, because he sort of felt like, maybe in another world he might have liked to have done that, and, had a very keen eye. So, but, I don't think there was anything sort of evident from any other family member other than, the crafting, the knitting, the sewing, and the usual.
And you just had it. You just had it in you. I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it, that you were drawing figures so early on.
Yeah.
And I always kind of think people who are abstract artists maybe can't draw, because that's that's me.
I know.
And you sort of think
That's
if you
thought
can
too.
draw, then you'd end up drawing realistic, or doing work that's a bit more realistic.
Well that's kind of something I have battled with, actually, is because I did always do portraits, and sort of through then high school years it was sort of like realistic, and I believed I could draw, and then after high school I went to art school, and that was still in Otago, so it was School of Art, so that was part of the Polytech, and that was just a complete eye-opener for me, because I thought that, to be in a creative field, you needed to show that you were technically sound with drawing, that you could, that you did have a good eye and you could replicate what was in front of you. And then got there and was just, had my tiny little mind blown, really, this young naive girl from Balclutha who was just suddenly amongst people who didn't necessarily value the fact that I could draw something that, was a reasonable likeness of what was in front of me. And it was quite a shock.
But so good, I guess, to kind of take you out of your comfort zone. So when you, just going back slightly, when you thought about art school, what were you thinking for your future? Did you think, I'm going to be an artist? Was that always in your mind?
Always to be an artist, because it seemed like the safe option was always to be an art teacher. And my dad had this very outdated notion that those who can do and those who can't teach. And so I just assumed that I don't think it ever occurred to me that I couldn't be one. As it turns out, it wasn't quite that straightforward. There have been many twist and turn along the way.
Many iterations.
Yeah. Long and winding road. But your art school was quite short-lived, as it turned out.
Was it?
So I had a brilliant year and made good friends, had a good time, partied, did a lot of drinking, and just what? Maybe sort of definitely lacking in self-discipline, but just sort of loving all the other options that were available at the time.
Which is understandable when you come from a tiny
small town. And I was a year younger than most of my cohort, so I was, pretty young and fresh and impressionable. And we had quite an outrageous life drawing tutor there, and he was quite notorious. He used to have us stand in front of our easel. It was from 9 o'clock in the morning until 4, and we'd have our model in front of us, and we had to stand at all times with our weight evenly distributed over both legs and our arm a full straight arm's length from the easel. And if we, sort of shifted our weight to one hip or sort of, scooched in a bit close to the easel, then he would come along and he would do things like stub out his cigar on your drawing that you'd been working on all day, or he'd take a lighter to it and set it on fire. So he was terrifying. And,
God.
Lots of people would sort of like, running out of his room in tears and everything else. But I was terrified and I'd been forewarned. So I just sort of said nothing and sort of sucked it up, really. And, in hindsight, he was probably a very clever man and had a lot to teach, but I've got quite a good tendency, did then still do, to sort of like run away and avoid tricky situations. And so I just stopped attending.
Really?
And then got to the point at the end of the year where I thought, oops, I haven't got enough credits left at the end of the year or blocks of units of work. And so by about September, October, I thought, oh my God, I need to willingly pull out before they're going to boot me out.
Really?
And yeah.
Oh, what a shame though, isn't it, that he influenced that decision?
I don't know that he did. I wouldn't blame him. I would just, it was me, and I probably was looking at all sorts of excuses at the time, but I just think I wasn't ready.
Yeah, it's so young though, isn't it?
It's young. Actually, in my class was Michael Tuffery. So he's Michael and maybe a couple of others I see. I think Jenna Packer was the same year. So I have seen some who've gone on to do brilliant things. And I've kind of looked at them over the last, God knows how many decades in between, and thought, oh, imagine if I'd carried on.
Really?
So yeah.
Wow. We're just going to take a very short break for the Creative Notice Board for this week. I wanted to remind you that Muriwai Artists Collective are having open studios and a really amazing art trail on Saturday, May the 3rd and May the 4th from 10 till 4. We've got about 21, I think, artists showing their work in their studios, and it is the most fantastic little art trail. So make a day of it, and I would love to see you here at the studio. I'll have my work up for you to have a look at, and also you'll be able to see where all the podcast action happens. So very much hoping to see you there. Also, if you'd like to place a creative ad on this notice board, it's only $50, and it's a good way to get some information out there. And also, it really does help support what I do with the podcast. So just get in touch via Instagram if you're interested in that. And now back to Michelle. So you left art school. Where did you go from there?
Oh, very briefly, I sold shoes. And I waitressed, and then thought, time to get back into studies again. So I went and did a degree, still at Otago, did a BA, and it was in anthropology and education. Not very practical, but very interesting. And yeah, so did them on my very last day of uni, literally the last day, racing out the door. I saw a notice on the notice board, and it was for any graduates of any degree if they were interested in going and teaching English in Japan. So I had no thoughts of doing that. I wanted to travel, I wanted to escape, but I kind of felt like I wanted somewhere a bit more dusty and sort of dirty and chaotic and adventurous than Japan, but applied and got into a program that sent me into a really rural part of Japan. There were 3,000 of us sort of from the English-speaking countries who came in every year, and I was placed in a city the size of Dunedin, pretty rural, and taught English in various high schools there. Again, totally mind was blown. Like New Zealand didn't even have sushi restaurants happening at that stage.
Yeah.
And so everything was new. The food, obviously the language, and I wasn't in one of the big cities, so there was no... there weren't many fellow Westerners around me, and I think I kind of probably had a few panic attacks and anxiety attacks when I first got there, thinking, what the hell have I done? Get me out of here. And thought, I'll stay for 1 year, I'll just do my initial contract, and then I'll have some dosh in my pocket and I'll just take off and, travel. And then I just got into it and became really quite obsessed, and started reading about it and started sort of, like just finding the whole thing about Japan. One of the interesting things about Japan is that for 200 years they voluntarily shut down their country in sort of like 1600s to 1800s because they didn't want any foreign influence coming in. And so it meant that their own culture and arts just really flourished without outside influence. And because of that, everything there is just felt so distinct and just so very Japanese. And I was really totally mind-blown. I could see that it was a country that absolutely, absolutely supported and respected the arts. And even going to a display that was set up in a shopping mall, and it was a display of artwork by kindergarten-aged kids. And I remembered looking at them thinking, these are insane.
Really?
You know, how like comparing to what kids in our country of the same age would be doing, just feeling as though they have just got just this aesthetic and this eye and presumably training that is just like is just sort of like quite amazing to see. Things like the tea ceremony and their calligraphy and stone gardens, rock gardens and so on, you know, they just, everything was just really considered and simple and yet really complex at the same time. And I loved that. I was just really...
It almost sort of reminds me of your practice, that just what you've said, that it's very considered and simple. Yeah. I wonder if that experience, if you can see any sort of connection to the art that you make.
100%. Yeah. And I don't know that I fully realised that, but I did, you know, I left there. I ended up staying for 7 years. And so...
Well, that's a long time.
Yeah. I loved it, you know, so got a degree in Japanese while I was there. And...
I didn't know this about you.
Yeah. I became a total Japanophile.
Wow.
And had the Japanese boyfriend and got to the point of, you know, feeling like, okay, do I stay in Japan or do I come back to New Zealand? Because I probably had begun to feel equally as at home in both places, but just decided that I was ready to come home finally. And so, you know, over the years, I have wondered why I still refer back to Japan. You know, I'm sure people would often wonder the same thing about me, thinking, God, that was so long ago. But I don't think I'd realised just how much it kind of had infiltrated the way I looked at things and saw things. And even as recently as, which we can get to later, but going to Brown School of Art last year was kind of when I was forced to sort of dig a bit deeper into my thoughts, and then thought, oh my God, this makes sense that this sort of aesthetic and way of looking at things translates over to the new work that I'm wanting to do now.
Yeah, so I can see that. And I guess, you know, 7 years in your, early 20s.
Yeah, so pretty much
teens,
all the 20s, yeah.
Most of your 20s. So that is a very influential time, I think, and sort of forms your person.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember as I was leaving, a Japanese woman came up to me and said, thank you so much for giving us the best years of your life. And I thought, oh my God, no. Shit, did I really do that? Give them the best years? But I didn't. But, you know, it was all of my 20s.
Yeah, that's huge. So were you thinking at that time that you still wanted to get back into your own art making?
Nope. No. So after art school, I had decided I'm only ever going to have art as a hobby. And while I'd been in Japan, I had been looking into woodblock printmaking and pottery, and really, really loved that. And, you know, and concepts that I know everyone talks about now, but they were very new for me at the time, of wabi-sabi and shibumi. And so I thought, yep, that's a hobby. But my whole new gig was now, I speak Japanese. I'm going to come back to New Zealand. I'm going to teach Japanese. So did that in Wellington and Christchurch. And
at high schools?
At high schools, yeah. Hutt Valley High School, which was brilliant, and Riccarton High School in Christchurch. Had by that stage met Simon. Yeah, after a year or so at Riccarton, I went off on maternity leave, and that's when I started to get back into a few things creative.
That's so fascinating. How interesting.
Yeah.
And what were you making when you started getting into it? I mean, I remember that feeling when I had our first child, just thinking, oh my God, I actually can't just do this mothering thing, and I need to. I really, my creativity really spoke to me then, like just when Taylor was still a baby, just thinking I need to make alongside being a full-time mum. And that's when it started for me. It's almost like, I don't know, it's like it's always been there, but then that was just some sort of little catalyst to actually get you making. It's like you need that. Well, I needed that sort of dual life. I needed something else. With
I
my
think your mental
parenting.
space is freed up. I mean, you might be physically exhausted, but I think your mental space is still wanting to be challenged and doing other things other than mothering. But I was a stay-at-home mum, and I absolutely loved that. I was very happy, and so initially it was just they were the best dressed kids and babies in town. They had, the sewing and knitting came to the fore initially. And then I thought, I started doing some life drawing classes at University of Canterbury, just community classes with Grant Banbury, which was brilliant, and some lino cut printmaking, just private classes with a woman called Carrie Dingwall. And so I started thinking, wow, this is coming full circle. This is what I want to do. Started looking into going back to maybe going to Ilam in Christchurch, and was sort of starting on that path. And then the earthquakes happened. So we had... So we were living in Redcliffs, and so they were the seaside suburbs, and they were the ones that sort of got particularly slammed in the two earthquakes. Kiddies were 5 and 7 by this stage, and absolutely terrorised. So our house collapsed. The school that the kids were at, Redcliffe School, had a massive big cliff behind it that sort of like sent down boulders and killed people on the side of the, property next to the school. And the kids were it was a terrible time. And Simon sells real estate, so the real estate industry in that suburb was gone. So we hightailed it out of there and just thought... Neither of us are Cantabrians, and we're not employing people. We don't have elderly parents to stay and care for. And so we really quickly got out and moved to initially Nelson. And it was horrible. Like, Nelson was great, but it was just a horrible, horrible time. And... like every morning just waking up and just feeling sick with dread and worry and, no income. So Simon picked up real estate, but there's no sort of retainer in real estate. So if you're not selling, you're not earning. Kids were quite, needy and emotional. And so I started doing a bit of relief teaching in Nelson, but didn't really want to get into teaching, but knew that it wasn't a time to be picky. And so then I just went door knocking to Red Art Gallery, actually. They were really lovely, went to them and showed them some of my lino cuts, and they took me on, and I had a little joint show there, which was the first one. Can't remember how they did, but it was enough to give me some sort of affirmation that, you
Yeah.
know, there was interest and, you know, maybe we could do something, or maybe I could do something with it.
And out of interest, what were your lino cuts like?
Oh my God, totally different to what they are now. So it was kind of like there was a bit of a Japanese aesthetic to them, and they were just quite simple kina, sand dollar, sort of lots of different styles of kina, carved and printed. And then I had a little Japanese hanko, which is the seal. I had my name put into Chinese characters, and so it had a little stamp of my characters for Michelle in the corner, and yeah, really quite simple pieces.
Sounds lovely.
And then, so initially they were that, and then I started to do larger pieces that were circular, of sort of about 800 or 900 millimeter circles. And they were made from tiny little cutout pieces of carved lino that were all individually sort of blocked into the circle. And so there was bush ones where I would do, you know, nikos and pongas and, you know, all of the native scenery. There would be coastal ones and, yeah, seed pods. Quite like...
So
totally
you were
different.
Still responding to nature, but not so much landscapes, more plants.
Yeah, not landscapes at all.
Yeah.
No.
Oh,
So
interesting.
moved to Auckland and fell in love with Auckland immediately. And sort of within 4 days of being here, said to Simon, "I'm never leaving this place.
Really?
I just love it here."
You often don't hear of people talking like that about Auckland for some reason.
Everyone said we were headed in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Usually people are busting to get out of here.
It's funny, it gets a bit of a bad rap. But I just think Auckland, you know, when you've got the Waitemata Harbour and the Hauraki
so
Gulf.
Beautiful.
And then the West Coast beaches and the East Coast beaches.
So beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
And, you know, we're South Islanders, so we think we've got all the, you know, all of the scenic
stuff.
beauty down
Yeah.
there. And, you know, and then we saw the Coromandel, and we, you know, every time I drive over the motorway and see the Sky Tower and, you know, just see things lit up, I instantly fell in love. We had, you know, people from elsewhere think that Auckland is you know, they have a certain impression, but we were renting in Meadowbank, and, you know, a neighbour who we'd only known for about a week or so, she took a day off work to then drive me around and show me different schools for me to get the kids into, and, you know, people were giving us stuff because we were earthquake refugees, and yeah, it was a really kind of embracing place, really.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Yeah, so you got to Auckland and then how did your art practice handle the move?
It was good. It was good. So I went to door knocking. I went to Next Door Gallery and quite a few different places. Soul Gallery in Hamilton, and used to be a gorgeous place in Parnell called Essence. Poi Room was in there. And at that stage, I was initially doing lino cut prints and then just made the move to painting. Partly, Simon was pretty keen for me to paint.
Really?
And he just kept on suggesting I should. And I resisted because he was so insistent that I paint. And then I did end up thinking the colours are a lot more brilliant with paint. I think I want to get into this. And so, yeah, they started out at Next Door Gallery. And they became landscapes and seascapes. So quite different to my lino cut subject matter. And but still kind of having a bit of a print making aesthetic to them. Like they were kind of almost painted like a screen print, in that I sort of loved the overlay of transparent glazes, masking off an area and having those colours like to make the green, I'd put down the yellow layer first, and then I would put down the blue transparent layer over the top. And I sort of quite liked having little edges of the original colours at the sides, which sort of showed you, what had been part of the process of the colour making. And I was just really enjoying that process. And, they started out quite simple, which is what I'd wanted. But I did find myself more and more becoming tighter and tighter and more complex, and sort of my painting style, which it kind of just drifted that way. And I don't think that was necessarily what I'd originally intended, but it is just what it is. And so by this stage, I was at Turua Gallery as well.
Okay. And so when was that? What year was that?
I think Liz emailed about, oh my God, I don't know. I feel like maybe I've been there about 5 years.
Mm-hmm. So your work then, you said it was seascapes. Was it the kind of work that you were doing before 2024? Was it similar, or was there quite a shift over a period of time with that kind of painting?
Not much of a shift, I don't think. And I think probably the thing I was wanting was that it would always be recognisable as mine. But I do feel like I was flip-flopping a little bit. I was seeing other people's works, and that's a dangerous thing. I was seeing so many works and then thinking, oh, I could try that. And so I was, almost every night going to bed after looking at other artists and just constantly, so excited to wake up the next morning thinking, oh, I'm going to try this and I'm going to do that. And, it was kind of good in some ways for helping me get to where I was up until last year, but it wasn't being driven from me.
Yeah.
It was, I was being influenced.
And why do you think you felt you needed to do that at the beginning? What was it that made you feel like you needed to look at other people's work and bring that into your practice?
I think it's because I didn't know what I liked. So what I actually did sort of in the early days of when I was initially besotted with Instagram and Pinterest was I would scroll through all of these artists until I found someone who would stop me dead in my tracks and think, oh my God, that's my find for the day. And each day, they just came thick and fast, the ones I really loved. And so then I thought, okay, what is it that I really love about them? And by this stage, there were so many of them. So I started making boards where I could see them all and then analysing, thinking, so what is it that I like? And what is it that always makes me stop in my tracks at a particular painting? And it kind of goes back to what, you and I were talking about with the sort of the fractured, almost sort of collaged look of pieces. I just thought, okay, I don't stop in my tracks with sort of impressionistic works. I like a hard edge. I like, which the Japanese printmaking was. It was always crisp edged and clean, and there was a simplicity to it, and it was quite often, sourced from nature in some way. And so I think the reason I was looking at so many was just trying to figure out what are the common threads here. A bit stormy outside.
Yes, it's very stormy outside. So if you can hear strange noises, it's
Tropical Cyclone Tam,
very
I think it's
windy.
called.
Was it got a name now?
Yeah,
is it?
Tam.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so we're sitting in the studio in amongst the wind, not actually raining at the moment. So yeah, anyway, carry on.
Yeah, so that was just what I was doing. I was trying to get clarity. I always kind of joked that I thought I was artistically ADHD. And turns out there may be some truth in that, more than I'd realised. But, I just had so many things clattering around that I thought, love this, love this, love this. And I kind of felt as though technically I could probably do that. Technically I could possibly do something like that. And so it wasn't very helpful, in a nutshell.
Do you think that you weren't at the point in your practice where you were getting your own ideas? Like
100%.
You needed to see. And I was a bit like that too at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of your sort of explorative phase probably of your practice.
Yeah.
Which kind of needs to happen.
It does need to happen. Yeah. It's very easy to do that in those early stages.
It's almost
where
like
you're always looking sideways at, what else is going on around you.
But I feel like it could be a negative thing, but also in a way it's like scaffolding, it's kind of supporting you, and you're sort of being fed ideas which then at some point you can turn into your own ideas. And because you hadn't been developing your practice at art school hugely, then, maybe that's what you actually needed. Yeah. So your practice is so interesting and I'm so in love with it. And you have almost had sort of one style that has kind of morphed into or evolved into a slightly different style. You can see the connection. I think you can see the artist is the same. But it's such an interesting journey to me that you've had this one practice responding to mostly the sea, right? Would you say? Seascapes. Yeah. And then this practice is also responding to place and sea and landscape, but is probably slightly more abstract, would you say?
Yeah.
So just for people who aren't familiar with your work, could you maybe explain the work that you were making before 2024? And then we can talk about your experience at Brown School of Art and how that brought you to the new work that you're making.
Yeah. Typically... So sort of going back to that faceted sort of look, I think I have typically been attracted to any sort of subject matter that gives me a good facet. And so, that could be mountains, it could be, it could be the surface of water, it could be, other things. But yeah, so I sort of felt like I wanted to just produce that hard-edged, what I was saying before. I wanted things to look really light and sort of translucent. So I paint in acrylic and I would mix it with a hell of a lot of glazing medium so that it's actually, I don't go through my paint tubes very quickly, but I go through my glazing medium quite fast. And so they're just sort of, by building up those layers of different colours on top of each other, it kind of works in the same way that a watercolour works, where it's transparent, and so you've got the white background shining through, which gives it more clarity. And so I think my paintings have always been quite intense in colour because of that process, and because I tend to choose paint colours that are also, transparent in nature. And so, I think that was probably what would be more recognisable by them. And then I sort of, would do a lot of masking with tape to sort of block off different areas as I sort of like sweep over a different coloured glaze, fingers and wet rags and going through and just sort of scratching and sort of like wiping back and and sort of mostly with a bit of an edge to them, which are the, as I said before, the sort of the remnants of the different layers that have gone before. And I have to say, I did an art course over at Corbyn's, and I don't know when this was, but sort of early 2020s, with a British artist, and he was he was the winner actually of Landscape Artist of the Year, a sort of Sky competition that they have in the UK. And he came out here, he was young, he and his wife, and they did a residency out here. And I went to one of his classes, and there were sort of similarities. He worked in oil, and his subject matter was totally different. His was sort of urban scenes, but I just fell in love with that. His was also sort of very angular, and his were quite, a lot of perspective and architectural in a lot of ways. And he was probably the first person who really made me feel, he gave me confidence. I listened to his advice, whereas, in the past, lots of people tend to give you advice, but unless I felt like they were qualified, I was kind of, I felt like he was qualified. And so he was really supportive and encouraging. And I think that was kind of the first time when I thought, okay, maybe this is, something to work with.
Yeah. And painting, once you started painting, did you think, oh, okay, this is my medium?
Yeah.
Interesting that your husband really wanted you to paint. I wonder where that came from.
Oh, look, he credits himself with always knowing what I should do before I do it. So what he is, he has got a really good eye, and he has also got quite a good, he often knows what, if you're making work commercially, I think he's good at that. He knows what will be commercially popular. And so I will give him that.
Yes. Well, that's good. But he obviously had that vision, and he was right. So just looking at your older work, which is only a few years ago, it's not sadly old, but, before 2024, as you say, it's seascapes that have been sort of divided into shapes and sort of fragmented a little bit, some of them more than others. So some are actually quite realistic landscapes, and some have land, and some are just sea. And you seem very fascinated with the sort of patterns and reflections and shadows of the surface of the water. Well, firstly, where does that fascination come from, do you think?
I like pattern. I like repeating patterns, and as a family we always have water. We always have holidays that are centered around the water, so my family are huge boaters, surfers, paddleboarders, wakeboarders, everything else. Not so much me. And so I'm always, water is really fascinating. And so that's my thing of just looking at it. And so therefore it's about the feeling, and it's about how it makes me feel. And I realized, and actually Matthew Brown was the first one who made me realize, I think I'd always thought, oh yes, I paint water. And then he just said to me one day, such a simple thing, and he said, oh, you paint light. And I thought, oh my God, I paint light. It doesn't have to be water. It really is the light aspect. And I went home that day and I said to my family, oh my God, I paint light. And my daughter was like, well, duh, of course you do.
Hello.
Yeah. And so I thought, okay, so that is, there is a reason that it is just something that I'm drawn to. And because I'm drawn to it, I know that other people are too. I know that there's a really great book actually called The Blue Mind, and it talks about the effect that water has on people, and it's a measurable effect on people's physiological, psychological being. And, you only need to be near it or on it or in it or, the proximity. And so I started to think, well, that's an interesting hook because that's what I want when I look at a piece, I want immersion. I don't like distractions. I don't like, and I think this is what I've come to more and more, I don't like busyness. I just want it to be, the name of your studio here is solace. And solace is a word that I think of often and have named painting solace.
Really?
Because it is, like, for me, that's what it is. And I, not wanting to have any lofty ideals that, I'm suggesting that everyone else must feel the same by looking at my paintings, but I kind of have a wish that would be something that they would find from certain works.
And I think most definitely people do, and I certainly do. And I think as New Zealanders, we are very connected to the sea. But there is something, as you say, that's so powerful about bodies of water, especially sea for me more than lakes for some reason. And, just going down to Muriwai and standing in the water, it's just like, whoa, it's this powerful energy that you get. It's like a sort of supercharge. And it's, if I go for a few days without being on the beach, I might walk in the forest or the bush, which I also love. But there's nothing that compares with being on the beach and paddling in the water or swimming or, it's just a powerful thing. And I think it's almost like your paintings take people away to that place.
So there's another book which Julie Battisti mentioned her maybe on her Instagram. It's an Australian woman and her name's Julia Baird, and she's written a book called Phosphorescence. I don't know if you've heard of it. Oh my God, it is just such a fantastic read. And so she talks about the role of awe in our lives and how, most people, you get that sense of awe when you encounter or immerse or look upon generally nature that humbles you and makes you feel like you are just so small in comparison, and that, and so, whether it be an ocean swim or, mountaineers or, I remember even my 14-year-old at the time son, George, going to Tongariro and just coming up over the brow of a hill, and he said it was just so majestic, which I thought was quite a cool word for a 14-year-old boy. But, and so her book says that when you place yourself or immerse yourself in these sort of like awesome settings, you actually, it's believed that you actually come away knowing how little and unimportant you are. And so you do actually start becoming nicer in your interactions with people around you. And, you are, it's like you've been put in your place.
Yeah.
You're not the be all and end all. And so I think that sort of subject matter that it's kind of the only subject matter I feel like I'm actually interested in at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, me
May
too.
change, but, for now.
And so you have said to me in the past that you found it difficult to speak about your work before you studied with Brown School of Art. So what was it about your work or your practice or your thoughts that made it feel hard to speak about that body of work?
I just didn't understand why I did it, and so I just thought, I've spent all this time identifying the art that I like, but I don't know why I like it. And so I met up with, and it actually came about because of, GFC and art sales slowing down and having more and more of my own pieces around my house. And then, so just really looking at them and, really not taking away from them, but just thinking, I want something. I'm so attracted to works that are more abstracted And so that's what I knew that I wanted to do. But I wanted to do that under the umbrella of people who I respected and admired, because I thought, I don't just want to say, oh, look at me, I've, done this abstract piece, and not really know why I've done it or how to talk about it. So that was my purpose, and it was decided I would go into painting 4 level, which was great. Still, so this is at Brown School of Art, still having a class and, sort of cohorts and peers, which was really, really good. But at that level, they also introduce a lot of business people in the industry coming in as guest speakers. And it was just, it was practical, it was conceptual, it was supportive, it was challenging. I was shaking like a leaf initially. I had full-on imposter syndrome and just thought, don't ask me to talk about my work or why, because I have no clue.
And did you feel sort of insecure about your actual painting ability at all?
I don't think I did. But I know Matthew had said, initially you are spending your time just sort of learning your craft and your technique and how to paint. And that next part, which is, I think, the harder part, is that, so what's your meaning behind it? And why are you choosing to do this? And so I felt competent in technique, but I had just never been challenged like that. It was great. It was absolutely everything I wanted it to be. And so, you're allowed to go in and say what it is you want to get out of it. And I said, I want to become more abstracted in my work, and I want to be critiqued on it. And because I still hold on to, place as my starting point. So in some ways I think I'm not fully abstract. I'm sort of like, maybe I sort of am bridging sort of semi-abstract. I start from the point of place. And then, the advice I was given was that you're not taking a photograph or sitting down in front of it and trying to get a representational look. You're removing yourself, and what is your memory of that place, and how did it make you feel, and you're trying to put your feeling onto the canvas, and which forces you to distill it down into really simple things. You're not getting caught up in the little details that actually aren't important. And Catherine Stevens, who was the other tutor there, she was really good at just saying to me, is that part necessary? Is that necessary? Do you think you could reduce it further? Could you take that out? And it was a really, so my works through there became they became quite geometric.
Yeah.
There's still a similar palette, but it's a lot more subdued. I think it's not as intense, but there are still some zingy, intense bits in there.
Yeah.
But I remember doing some pieces for Turua, and Catherine had looked over them, and she said to me, "I'm still quite busy." And I said, "Oh no, I kind of can't help. I just think, I'll just put a little bit there and a little bit there." And then she said to me, "Do you not trust your audience to get it if you don't, throw as much as possible at them?" And I thought, I wonder if I do still have that feeling of I need to give them bang for their buck.
Yeah.
And try and put as much in there.
That's a great way of actually framing it.
Oh, just that, trust your audience. They can cope with less if it's working.
Yeah.
If it's considered, and so that goes back to that Japanese thing of talking about shibumi before, which I totally, totally love. And it is that less is more. And something might look really, really simple, but in fact it's not. And it is very considered, and it has taken some thought to get there. And I'd kind of equate it to, I don't know if you ever watched those, The Voice or the singing
Not
talent
really,
shows on
yeah,
TV.
I know what you mean.
And you know, years ago I would watch them, and someone would come out just simply acoustically, just with a guitar. And, you know, the judges would say, that is the hardest. You've got nowhere to hide. It's just you, your voice, and your instrument. And I kind of didn't understand that. I thought, no, that's got to be the easiest way, surely. And now I get it.
Yeah,
you know, it's
yeah.
like any balls up you do, first of all, sticks out immediately because, you know, your eyes a tricky thing. It will always sort of scan, and it will find anything that's not sitting right in there. And so...
And I also, sorry to interrupt, I also feel like simplicity for an artist, I think it takes experience and confidence in your work to make simple work, so-called simple work.
Yeah.
You know, I do feel... I love the more simple the better for me, but same with you, kind of feel like I need to do more to make it okay.
Worthwhile. Yeah.
But then the more confidence I'm getting, the more I'm making as I get older. I'm just like, well, that's what I want to do. So
Absolutely.
that's what I'm going to do.
Absolutely.
But I do love the idea of having some sort of expert influence. I feel like that would be great for my practice as well.
Yeah. I think for everyone. I really do.
How many days were you doing a week?
No, it's one day every 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So manageable that there were 3 of us who joined that year, 2 other artists who you may know, and if you don't, you should know, Maria Owens, who's out west, or she's in Tirarangi, and Kate Cox, who is up in Kerikeri. So they also were probably in the same boat as me and had their work out there, and it's all we do. Whereas a lot of the others in the class are, it was such a gorgeous class. It was so cool. But, you know, really diverse backgrounds. So, you know, there was a GP and, you know, counsellors and psychologists and so on. So for a lot of people who are holding down other jobs, it was really manageable. You've only got, so it's every 2 weeks. One of those 2 weeks is the practical session where you've got Matthew and Catherine just sort of like gliding by and sort of parking up with you for a bit. And then the alternate classes are sort of workshops with people coming in to speak to you. And
how
so on.
amazing.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh, my God.
I like, honestly, the best thing, I sound a little bit evangelical about it, but it was so what I needed, and I couldn't recommend it more. If you have a little inkling of what you want, because they're open to providing you with what it is that you feel like you need at the stage that you're at.
Which is so great. And it's been fascinating watching your practice evolve. You know, it really has been beautiful to see, and I love all the work that you've created right from, you know, the beginning.
Yay.
And it seems like when I look at your Instagram, it did kind of start with more sort of horizontal, lineal works, which still feel very much like horizons and land and sea, but in quite a sort of abstract way.
Yeah.
And then you made the shift into kind of breaking into different sections.
Yeah.
And again, sometimes you feel like you're seeing an island, but it's sort of representational, but not, but in an abstract way, if that's possible. So how did you make the shift from going from your very sort of patterned works to the horizontal lineal to the really quite fragmented?
So I think because I wanted to make it more simplistic, and because my camera roll is full of horizons and seascapes, I thought, okay, that's sort of my starting point. And so it began from there. And they were, like, I really liked them. I sort of liked playing with the idea of sort of some parts of it looking like they were coming forward, like almost playing with the planes of the painting. So, you know, some looked like they were receding and others didn't. And you could almost look at them in different orientations so that they didn't necessarily look like a seascape. Your eye doesn't read them as that. But, you know, for them to try and get them to still work as a painting compositionally, even if you were to sort of rotate it around. And then I think I just thought, okay, well, that's a bit limiting. I don't want to just do horizon lines. And so I started to look at other places that we were visiting, like Waipu Cove was probably the first one I did. And, you know, and the other good thing about Brown is that you're also encouraged to look at other artists and see, you know, what they're doing, as in, you know, like I was looking at Richard Debencorn, who I love, and Ben Nicholson, and a lot of sort of geometric abstract artists. And so, yeah, you know, sort of looking at them, and then but also needing to bring it back into your own practice and your own why, and what you're going to do with it moving forward. And I just found that if once I started sort of breaking it up into shapes more, then, you know, initially I would have thought sticking with sort of one genre, maybe like that, would get really boring and I'd need to kind of flit off again as I had done in the past. But I've actually found that I feel like this is for me. And so I feel like it's just going to be a bit more of a linear development from now on, instead of, and then thinking within those works, there's so much scope for contrasts and, you know, light and dark and opaque versus transparent, and texture versus smooth, or, you know, visible brush strokes sort of butted up against totally, you know, smoothed
Flat.
off pieces, and just thinking, oh, you know, I really do just feel like it feels endless in the ways in which I can take it. Even you know, sort of getting excited at the thought of other materials. And, you know, it doesn't just have to be paint.
Really? Interesting. Like collage, mixed media.
Like collage, yep. And if you're looking through the Instagram, like the colouring in pencils also.
Yes, oh my God, I love those. So are they watercolour pencils?
I've always had watercolour pencils, but when we were in Australia at Christmas time, I kind of needed to do something and didn't have paints. So just went in and bought some really good pencils, but these ones aren't watercolour. So, but I do kind of mix and match them. But that was kind of quite a lovely way to do some studies for some bigger paintings.
And they are so beautiful on the textured paper. Is it like watercolour paper?
Yeah, they're tiny. They're just like little A3 sized.
Yeah. Or A5.
A5. That's what I mean.
Yeah, and I feel like that needs to be another range that you sell.
Yeah, I've thought that too. And then I also thought of incorporating the two of them together. And I just feel like, it's all exciting.
Isn't that good? It's such a good feeling when you feel like you've just got a whole lifetime of stuff to explore.
Totally.
Yeah, and I love the idea of thinking sideways and, you know, moving away from certain mediums and coming back and combining and, you know, all of that. It's so exciting. And I feel like your mark making does come through as well, which probably goes back to your lino cut work and your Japanese influence. Just very subtle mark making through your paint is quite beautiful too. You know, just the lines, which I presume you're just making with your paintbrush, you know, sometimes accidentally even. But they're beautiful.
Yeah, well, that's with the one you're looking at there is that's about the 14th rendition of that one. So, there was quite a bit of build-up of layers of paint because I couldn't get it right. And so then it was just taking some squeegee, rubber squeegee, and just sort of clawing my way through it and doing things and thinking, oh, yeah, that looks good.
Yeah.
And
trying new tools is a good way.
Yeah, new tools and, sort of keeping it within the composition so that there can be those areas of busyness and focus and sort of condensed lines, but just balanced out with sort of more open spaces where, things sort of rest a bit more and, just sort of getting a bit more of a contrast going within it.
Contrast and balance, I guess.
And balance, yeah.
And what did the experts at Brown School of Art say to you about, keeping it sort of like knowing when to stop and keeping it cohesive, but not too much or not too little, or, how do you find that perfect balance? What did they recommend?
I don't know that I can answer that. I do know that they were very good at sitting and looking a long time without commenting, which is kind of, ooh, what's the thought process going on there? And then just getting a little sort of, so why did you do that line there? And I would be like, ooh. And so just really taking time looking at it. And again, maybe that's just because that's what I'd requested that I wanted from them, to pare it back and make it more economical and sort of line and a bit more spare. And so they would really question everything I'd put on there and say, is that bit there necessary? Did you, if you remove that, does it still deliver the feeling that you're going for? And yeah, I don't remember specifically about sort of balance or anything. Maybe I kind of just inherently kind of knew how to do that.
And are you thinking, do you have much of a plan, or, you're obviously starting to do small sort of studies to start with sometimes with your watercolour pencils, but are you actually kind of planning out and designing before you start? I know that you often do respond to places like Whangamata, which is one of your special places.
Yeah.
And you use photographs, as you said. So what is your actual process from beginning to end?
Yeah. So what I had started with when I first went to Brown was a painting that was sort of a halfway point between my old style and where I wanted to go. And it was critiqued quite heavily. And Matthew said to me, why don't you do the same painting but do 3 different versions of it and see what you find works? And I thought, oh my God, that is such a good idea.
Yeah.
I didn't do it. I just thought, oh, that takes far too much time. So I didn't do that, Matthew, but I did think, I did get onto my notebook a bit more and sketchbook and think, okay, if these are the shapes of what I'm looking at or where I want to be, like I do play around with them a lot more. And so, so there is obviously that removal of what's not necessary. But I also often, like I was saying before, turn them around and just think, your eye, I think everything I make, your eye very quickly reads it as being landscape. So I kind of like that, but I'd kind of like it to move away from that too. And so maybe that's, more simplification or cropping it more. But I also think rotating it around and sometimes having it vertical instead of horizontal can switch it into something else.
Do you feel like you're painting a landscape when you paint it, or do you have somewhere in mind and then you turn it and it becomes less of a landscape, which is good. It's what you want, but you are sort of starting with that base of place.
Always. Yeah. Yeah.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, to create something with something in mind and then to sort of spin it.
Yeah.
And then lose that almost, but that you need that to start.
Well, I think if that's the inspiration, and that's where, there is the light and the clarity and the forms, then that's kind of what I want to take away from it. And so it doesn't matter what the composition is after that. So, maybe they will be, I think you can take those elements and play around with them within your sort of perimeter quite a lot, and it becomes a painting in its own right. It doesn't have to be the way that headland, that headland is off to the right, or, the way that, whatever. And so, that's just, I think that's probably reducing it down further.
Yeah. That's a great starting point. Yeah. I wonder
Good starting. Like, I just feel like there are so many ways to take it. I just think it's really exciting.
It is exciting. And even with colour, the way you approach colour, I feel like you're getting more explorative in a way with colour. You're moving away a little bit from your more traditional, well, not traditional, but your colour palette and trying all sorts of different colours, which is really beautiful. But you have such a sense of colour. I think you're a colourist.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I love colour.
You are very, very good with the way you combine colour, in my humble opinion.
Thanks.
So you often are responding to a particular place, as I said. Are you still taking photographs and sort of representing that within your starting part of your process, do you think? An actual place?
At this point, yeah. Yeah, I still am.
And sometimes you title your works in response to that place?
At the moment, I pretty much always am, because I still think that that's the starting point. However, when you've done as many whangamatās as I've done, it's kind of, I don't really know where I go next, because it's, other than whangamatā 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. But I think place is really, really important for me, and so what I don't want people to do is to think, oh, well, I'm not familiar with that place, so therefore I could never own that work. I do feel as though that's irrelevant, but the starting point was, what was happening that day and, at that place. But yeah, I think there always will be at this point
A reference
to
to the place, yeah. Because that's an important part of what you're thinking to start with anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting, isn't it? The way you title things and what it can bring to a viewer or what it can express for you. And especially when you're taking that abstract work away from maybe where it started, then it's kind of nice to hold on to that sort of that initial response.
It is. I think it is holding on to it. And, the other option is I have, sometimes sort of attached an emotion as the title to it, but I also think, that's just my reading on it. That may not apply to other people, and so whereas I feel like, I don't know, maybe it is the place for now.
Yeah, for now. Can we talk a little bit about scale?
Yeah.
So you have made some quite small works for different shows, which are also beautiful.
Yeah.
And they just feel like small versions of your big ones in some ways. You just bring it all down, but it's still quite detailed. but then you also really like to work quite big. I would love to see like big, like the size of a wall. Imagine that. So how do you approach scale and how do you know what kind of size to do?
So that was also one of the things that Matthew said was, he said, I need to see your work big. I think it just needs to be really big. And then he talked about, obviously no comparison, but he talked about a Rothko. And he said, the Rothko had said, I don't know, I'll get my numbers wrong, but the ideal distance that he thought to view his paintings from was 18 inches or something, like up close.
Really?
So that you actually, all your periphery is also filled with the painting. So you're actually immersed in it and you can see it. So Simon also, going back to Simon, who has opinions, Simon has also said, you've got to go big, you've got to go big. The largest I've done is I've just finished one that's 1 metre by 1.20 meters. That's my biggest. That's the biggest I can get in my car. So it is has been a bit dictated by that, but it's hard going big. It's great, and it's definitely the look I want, instead of the middle of the range. I really, really like to see them in a large scale, but yeah, just technically it's quite hard. If I'm doing a brush stroke and wanting the brush stroke marks to be shown through it and wanting each brush stroke to look quite confident, sort of in a calligraphic sort of way, I don't, then I kind of need to make sure I've got the whole length of my arm can move over it. So sort of sometimes I feel like I'd almost need to walk along the length of the canvas with the brush. But it's trying to upscale everything, like utensils and it becomes a lot more of an arm movement instead of just your hand.
Which goes back to your experience with the life drawing.
Yes, back to him.
Yeah, back to cigar squishing lecturer. Yeah. So I was just thinking, wouldn't it be amazing to cut up your small pencil works and then to place them?
Yeah.
And because it feels like the composition of your paintings it almost feels like they're sort of mini paintings all brought together. Yeah. Which I kind of think maybe when you're working big, you can kind of take each little shape as a painting and then think of it like that. So it's not so overwhelming in some ways because you tape off the sections. Yes. And then,
and so it is. You're right. It is like that.
Which is kind of good.
Yeah, makes
but then
it easier.
Sometimes you've got to go all the way across. But wouldn't that be beautiful, cutting up your pencil works and placing them in some sort of collage? Oh my gosh, there's so much noise out there. It's like everyone's chopping down trees.
They're busy outside.
I think it's rubbish day. Oh no, it's not rubbish day. Something's going on. Yeah. So obviously that time that you had at Brown School of Art in 2024 was quite pivotal in many ways. And for you personally and also for your art practice and for your family. And you were saying earlier that your family, members of your family and you were all going through some sort of a bit of self-analysis and really looking deeply into yourselves, and then you also were as an artist.
Yeah.
So how did that kind of present itself and resolve itself?
Look, they both kind of fed into each other in a way, in that so going back to the earthquakes and our kids who were everyone sort of is affected differently, they were really, really slammed by that. And we had there were quite a few really tragic events that happened around, to people that were close to our family. And so, there were sort of quite a lot of struggles going on behind the scene. And then, but it's a family that puts up a good facade. Like, we're quite good at masking and sort of trying to, keep a lid on things. And then one day my son, and my two children have both given me permission to mention this because they're very open books. He said to me that he thought that he might like to see whether he's got ADHD. Turned out both he and Molly got an assessment. I have a family history of ADHD, and so it is a genetic condition. And it was like when we found out that there were other things at play, and triggers can often set those things off. And I think in our case, it was most certainly the earthquake and the deaths that happened. It just became this really incredible period of sort of analysis of ourselves as a family, and me, of myself as well, and things that we were battling with as within the family and really struggling with. It kind of gave us clarity, and we got some help on that, and it's kind of like knowledge is power, right? And as part of that whole simplification, I looked at sort of the ADHD side of it and the anxiety, and just thought, we just need to declutter. And I mean sort of like physically, mentally, we need to strip things back to what is important and what is just has no place in our lives, and that we can just, sort of let that go. And so I think it's been really powerful for our kids to go forward in their lives, and, both, I have to say, doing brilliantly after having had a really, tough time. And so that was also fed into the whole thing of wanting to simplify and just be able to breathe and not feel overwhelmed. Overwhelmed is the word.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what, connecting it back to art, that's how I see my new pieces, and why it just felt like the fit was so perfect. It's kind of like, there is this mental wellness aspect to it. There is a simplification. It also feeds into this Japanese thread that just wasn't going away, and just getting some good solid help from, teachers. So
Well, thank you for sharing that.
yeah,
That's really special.
It was a really, it's just good to understand why things happen, and that there's a reason for it. They and my two kids are brilliant at just owning it, and and I don't know whether it's a generational thing or what it is, but they certainly don't feel any shame. They talk about it very readily.
Yeah, which is so good.
And just sort of tools and strategies and so on.
I think young people are better
than we are.
We are. Yeah, because it wasn't something that was discussed.
No.
Once.
No, and it would have been an earthquake thing for sure. That was the
catalyst,
the beginning of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how amazing that you have, it's almost like you have evidence of this period that you've gone through with your family through your work.
I know.
It's capturing that moment for you.
Yeah.
And that transition.
Yep.
Which is
it is. It's
beautiful.
Like a tangible outcome of it. And so, which is why they just feel really right to me, and so I can happily, in the past I think I've probably always been a bit of a people pleaser and wanting to make works that, every Tom, Dick and Harry who comes along and has an opinion about what I should or shouldn't do, I would try and do all of those things. Now there is so much more, okay, this is what I want to do, here's why I want to do it. And actually, if they're not, very saleable, or if, people object, or, it's just so relieving to just say, sorry, it is what it is.
Yeah. And I feel like you have absolutely 100% found yourself as an artist and reached a certain point as a family, which is very special and moving and emotional.
Yeah.
And then, you've just kind of cleared the path forward.
Yeah.
Which is so good.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So let's just speak briefly about your wonderful galleries. You're with Turua.
I'm with Turua.
And also Gallery de Novo.
Gallery de Novo.
So how did you just quickly connect with those people?
Liz and Dean at Turua, I think Simon tried to get in there first and go and suggest to them that they should check me out.
I love Simon.
Oh, Simon, he's a trier. He's a trier. Anyway, about a year later, I think, Liz emailed and asked if I'd be interested, and that was just, so many of your past guests have said that. They are the most gorgeous family. They have a way of of building around them a group of artists who just, I would dare to say, care for each other. And like in contrast, I remembered listening to another podcast on, I can't remember who it was, but it was on the Good Oil podcast, and an artist was talking about the gallery that they were at, and they were asked, did the artists all get on? And he said, wherever it was, he said, not really. He said, there's kind of like this feeling of, well, if you're having a show, that means I'm not, and so sort of a competition for space. And I feel like that's balanced really well at Turua. So they're hardworking, and so they have been pretty wondrous, really.
And they saw you on Instagram?
I guess so. Or maybe, Simon's seed planted a year ago had sort of, maybe it was like a little grain of sand that just wouldn't go away. But
I love that. Everyone needs a Simon.
Everyone does need a Simon. He's a bit of a hoot. And so, and then maybe I approached Gallery de Novo because it's Dunedin, and actually I think it started with, we went down there for one Easter, and we went out to the most beautiful Tunnel Beach, if you're familiar.
No.
And it's just this incredible place, and did a couple of paintings from there. And then maybe I hit them up and said, would they be interested? And that was kind of my foot in the door.
And just out of interest again, how are your galleries responding to your new work? And do they wonder if you might lose some of your audience from changing?
I think it might be inevitable that I will lose some. I did have a commission the other day, or the other month, which I thought was quite funny. She said that she wanted this particular scenario because it was important to their family, significant. And then she sort of sent another very rushed email back, and she said, "Oh, sorry, I don't mean to offend, but could you make it your earlier style? Not that latest style. I've seen that in the gallery, but sorry, just the first style."
Oh, interesting.
Which was all good, and I had assumed it was, because at this stage, most commissions are probably, of the more sort of representational pieces.
And you don't mind going back to that?
There might come a day where I don't. Yeah. I'd prefer not to, but, sort of, you do what you do.
Yeah.
When, at the time.
And probably as your work gets more known, your new work, then you'll start getting commissions for that.
Yeah, I hope so. So Gallery de Novo, they've got a group show coming up. Well, I think it's a birthday show for them, June or July. And I have given them some of my newer pieces, I had done at Christmas time, and they sent a note and sent up some canvases and sent a note with it and said, just saying, everybody loved those last, pieces. So really looking forward to seeing what you do next. So I thought, yay, that's
a relief.
It's a relief.
That's nice. I mean, you would do it anyway, but it must be nice.
I would do it anyway.
To have that affirmation.
Yeah.
And you've got a group show coming up with Te Rua.
Te Rua have got, it's called My Backyard or Our Backyard, and that's opening on the 9th of May. And they've got some lovely artists in that. So there's most of them have probably sat in this chair. I know there's Josh Lancaster, Judith Milner, Georgina Hobie-Scutt,
Kylie
Rusk, and Sean Belden.
Oh, they all have been on the show.
Yeah, so it's a Creative Matters / Te Rua show.
That's really nice. Yeah. Oh, maybe I need to come in and chat to everybody.
It will be. I think it'll be gorgeous because
it will be.
Quite a few different styles, obviously, going on there. And, on Instagram, I've just been seeing sneak peeks of people's works coming up and thinking, oh, my God.
Yeah, I think that will be a beautiful show. Lovely combination of artists.
Yeah.
And have you started selling your new works?
So I'm selling them through Te Rua, and
that people are buying them.
Yes,
good.
Which is good. And I've got another avenue which is opening up, and I'm sure I could be talking about it, but it was through Brown, and they had somebody come to speak with us who was starting up a new online platform, and it was for emerging artists. And so he went, the person who's running it went around Elam, Whitecliff, the Brown final show, and AUT, and has handpicked some artists from there. I'll probably be the oldest, I would imagine.
That's okay.
And so that's just sort of in the process of being built, really.
That's nice.
And that's for all of the more recent works. So
that's great.
It's exciting.
Yeah. Well done.
Yeah.
Okay, do you think that at 1 hour 40 minutes, do you think we're ready for the questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it too long?
It's not too long. It's the best.
Too long.
Such a good conversation. And I do find when I say when I connect even more with guests, but then I do just kind of naturally connect with them anyway. Once you start, when you're talking on this level, you just, you go to these places, even with people you haven't met before, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the wonder of you, Mandy. That's where you are so priceless for us. And I know that I've only just started supscribing to you. Is that the right word? Financially supporting.
Yeah.
What's the terminology, Mandy?
Supporting the show.
Yeah. I know that you've had a lot on your plate, and we've sort of had this podcast, penciled in for quite a while, and then you thought that, you might drop it back to doing them a little bit less often. And I think that was kind of a really good kick up the bum for artists and listeners to just think, I just came away thinking, I totally got it. I totally understood that you had so much going on. But I just thought, what a bloody asset for us to lose, to not have you, because you give so much, and you do have such a great way of talking with people and digging and delving, and we need you. And I just think it really is just a cup of coffee, isn't it, on the monthly basis. It's like, I'd love to go for a coffee with you monthly. So, I just think these things are a lot of work, and everyone's just trying to earn a living. So I'd love to see you continue and prosper and grow.
Thank you. That's so kind.
Anyway, enough about you. Back to me.
Okay. Question time.
Yes.
What would you say to somebody starting out on their creative journey?
I would say, first of all, don't expect things to happen in a huge hurry. I think that it's kind of a long game. Things don't happen overnight, and lots of people, there is no sort of qualification that means you can now call yourself an artist or you can't. And so lots of people sort of imagine they can be an artist and that it's just going to be easy, and there's sort of this expectation that the money will flow from there. And so I think just be prepared for being in it for the long haul. I also think it's a good idea to know yourself, and therefore you can be yourself and be authentic. Like, you can't I sort of wish I'd done that a bit sooner, instead of, having some of those realizations later on. And don't be such a people pleaser that you listen to unqualified advice from all and sundry, because everyone has an opinion. And I think just be really selective and with who you choose to take advice from.
Good advice. What is the most challenging aspect of being an artist?
I think that it's quite easy to compare yourself. I feel like, I don't know whether this is especially in New Zealand, but I think there's a lot of sort of comparing going on, and almost like people are trying to jockey for position and make a claim on sort of like a style or a subject matter or genre. And so I think that gets quite hard. It's a small pool, and trying to not step on each other's toes when, in fact, we're all sort of exposed to much of the same things. And we're all just trying, right? But yeah, it is a very real thing that you step on people's toes by producing things that are very similar to others. And I remember being told that when you are doing that, when you're sort of being influenced by someone else, it is just that's not actually coming from you. It is you just trying to be probably quite a poor copy of what someone else is already doing. And so I think, it's quite hard to find what it is that you actually, what feels most you, because I'm sure for all of us, there are a lot of things that feel a bit like us, but maybe sort of trying to identify, but what's most me?
Yeah. And what's really coming from you.
Yeah.
And I think that is time.
Yeah.
I think, and devotion to making.
Yeah.
I think you really need that to come to your, to your true artistic self.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
And you mentioned a few artists earlier. Are there any other artists who inspire?
Well, I love, so I mentioned Ben Nicholson, Richard Diebenkorn. For sort of the same reasons, I love Richard Adams.
Me too. I've done his workshop.
Have you?
At Brown
Are you
School
going
of
to
Art.
snaffle him in here for a podcast?
Oh, I've actually tried. Richard, if you're listening.
Keep trying, Richard.
Still waiting.
I love his work. I love Jeff Thornley, J.S. Parker. For sort of similar reasons, I am gobsmacked. I'm not just being a little fangirl, but I am gobsmacked by Matthew Brown and Catherine Stevens. And when I saw a piece of Catherine's at a show, I loved it so much, and it just kind of hit me. And I said to Simon, oh my God, that just makes me want to cry. I want it. And he was like, why would you want to own a piece that makes you cry? It's like, oh, what? And I just, so he kind of missed the point. But hers, I think, are just, they just feel like perfection to me.
Really?
Yeah, love them.
I need to get Catherine on the podcast.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And I'll just mention someone else I really love is Amanda Wilkinson, and she's in Wellington, and we through Instagram have become buddies, and also sort of found ourselves with so many coincidental sort of like 2 degrees of separation.
Yes,
but
I love her work too.
She's fantastic.
And she thinks a lot about shadow and light, doesn't she?
She has her family have an architectural background, so a lot of sort of geometric abstraction going on there. One day I'll own one of hers too.
Yes, I'd like to own one of hers. Well, that brings us to the end. We finally did it, Michelle.
I know. It was a long time coming.
Yep.
But things take time, Mandy.
Exactly, and it was worth waiting for sure.
Oh,
we both shed a few tears in between.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, which happens. We haven't actually had tears for a while on the podcast, so that's good.
Yeah, I love a good cry.
Absolutely. And I'm just, as I've said to you, I'm so drawn to your practice, and it's fascinating for me to hear more about it and to see your journey and how you've kind of evolved your work over a year has been really interesting and motivating. And it's great to hear, the backstory around that. So thank you so very much for coming out to Muriwai and for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.